If you think this is optional, this learning to deal with difficult people, you're already behind. This isn't something you can afford to figure out later, when life slows down or when people start being easier to deal with. Because they won't, and it won't. And if you're waiting for things to change around you so you can finally respond with peace or wisdom or grace, you're building your life on a fantasy. Difficult people aren't the exception. They're part of the reality of every single person's life. You don't outgrow this, you don't escape it, you confront it or it consumes you. There's something dangerous in the way we treat this as a small thing. We think dealing with people is just part of life's noise, something we navigate in between the important stuff. But this is the important stuff, how you treat people, especially the ones who test you, challenge you, wear you down. That's where the real work is. That's where your character is either formed or fractured. And the longer you ignore that, the more likely it is that your life becomes a pattern of reacting, lashing out, isolating, pretending to be okay while something in you keeps festering. It's not the calm seasons that reveal the truth about us. It's not when everyone is kind and polite and agreeable that you find out who you really are. It's when your patience is tested, when someone crosses a line, when your pride gets bruised. That's where the mirror is held up. That's where your beliefs stop being ideas and start becoming actions. And if you don't know how to deal with that pressure, if you haven't prepared your heart for that confrontation, you'll fall back on instinct. And instinct, unless it's been trained, will always take the path of least resistance. It'll say what feels good instead of what's right. It'll escalate instead of de-escalate. It'll protect your pride instead of guard your peace. Every moment you have with someone difficult is an opportunity, whether you recognize it or not. And I don't mean a soft, sentimental opportunity to just be kind or take the high road. I mean a high-stakes moment where you either take control of your spirit or give it away. You either act from your convictions or from your wounds. You either move forward or you dig deeper into the same tired rut you've been stuck in for years. This is not neutral. Your choices are shaping something real in you. And let me tell you, if you're waiting to feel ready, you'll be waiting forever. Growth doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a schedule. It shows up in the form of people who frustrate you, disrespect you, ignore you, or misunderstand you. And how you respond to them isn't just about them. It's about who you are when no one is applauding you. It's about what you hold sacred when your name is being dragged through the dirt. It's about whether you can stand in the fire of conflict and still speak with clarity instead of chaos. Some of you keep finding yourself in the same kinds of relationships, the same exhausting dynamics, the same repeated conversations, and you think it's just bad luck. You think you keep attracting difficult people, and maybe that's true. But the real question is, why do you keep responding the same way? Why do you keep letting someone else's dysfunction determine your direction? Why do you keep giving your emotional energy to battles that aren't even worth fighting? You were not made to live at the mercy of other people's moods. You were not made to be someone who's easily triggered, constantly reactive, always defending yourself. That's not who you were meant to be. But becoming someone stronger, someone more grounded, someone who can carry peace into a storm, it doesn't happen passively. It takes discipline. It takes intention. It takes urgency. Because if you don't take your development seriously, life will keep teaching you the same hard lessons until you do. I'm saying this because too many people are wasting years of their lives being offended, being bitter, being defensive. They think they're standing up for themselves, but they're really just stuck in a loop, and it's costing them. It's costing them real connection. It's costing them clarity of mind. It's costing them opportunities to be someone others can trust and follow. And maybe no one's told you this, but your presence affects people, your tone affects people, your habits, your words, your demeanor, they shape the atmosphere around you, and if you're not intentional, you'll end up being someone else's difficult person without even realizing it. You've got to make a decision, not once, but every day. You've got to decide that your peace matters more than your pride, that your future matters more than being right in the moment. That becoming who you're meant to be matters more than keeping score with someone who doesn't even see the full picture. That's not weakness, that's power, that's ownership, that's maturity, but it doesn't just show up in your life. You've got to want it. You've got to train for it, and you've got to understand that this matters more than you think. Some of you are trying to build something lasting, a marriage, a family, a calling, a legacy. You won't be able to do it if you can't handle people, if you can't rise above petty offense, if you can't hold your tongue when it's easier to destroy with words. You will sabotage your own success if you don't get this right. Because no matter how gifted you are, no matter how much you know, no matter how well you can speak or lead or inspire, if you can't handle the heat of difficult relationships, it will all crumble eventually. That's why you have to wake up to this. That's why I'm speaking like this, because the stakes are too high for you to keep pretending that your reactions don't matter, that your tone doesn't matter, that your inability to navigate hard people isn't costing you something. It is, and maybe you can't see it yet. Maybe you think this is just how life works, but the longer you avoid this work, the deeper the consequences become. This is the time to get serious, not later. Not when things calm down, not when the perfect moment arrives. Now, because life doesn't wait. People won't suddenly become easier. And the version of yourself that's needed in the future, the version that can lead with strength, that can love without fear, that can stand with integrity in the face of chaos, that version is being formed right now in the heat of your present struggles. So don't waste it, don't delay it, don't treat this lightly. You've got one life, one chance to become someone who can carry peace into every room, someone who doesn't just survive difficult people, but transforms because of them. And if that's going to happen, it starts here, it starts now, and it starts with you deciding that this isn't just another nice ideal. It's a necessity, one you cannot afford to ignore. We live in a time when it's easy to blame others. When something goes wrong in a relationship, when a conflict stirs up at work, when tension lingers in a conversation, our first instinct is almost always to look outward. It's almost reflexive. They misunderstood me. They were out of line. They're always like this. And we convince ourselves, often without even thinking about it, that the issue lies with them. We rehearse their faults in our minds like a well-worn script. We know every moment they were unreasonable, every word they said wrong, every tone they used. But rarely, almost never, do we pause long enough to ask, what about me? There's something uncomfortable, almost offensive about that question. It cuts against our pride. It challenges the idea that we are the stable, balanced, rational ones in the room. It forces us to look in the mirror and see not just our intentions, but our impact, not just what we felt, but how we acted. That kind of reflection doesn't come naturally. It has to be chosen, and more often than not, it has to be wrestled with. Why is it so hard to look inward? Maybe it's because self-reflection demands humility, and humility isn't something we pick up casually. It costs something. It demands we admit we don't have the whole story, that our emotions, no matter how loud, may not be telling us the full truth. It invites us to ask whether our reaction came from pain or pride, whether we really listened or just waited for our turn to speak, whether we walked away from a hard moment seeking peace or just wanting to be right. The truth is, the hardest person to confront in a conflict is not the other person, it's ourselves, because when you look inward, you see the parts of you that don't align with who you want to be. You see the defensiveness that flares up too quickly, the sarcasm you used to shield yourself, the way you shut down instead of speaking honestly, the small, sharp choices you made to punish someone in silence. And when those things rise to the surface, the temptation is to justify them. Well, if they hadn't said that, if they would just own their part, but that path keeps you stuck, it keeps you blind to your own growth. Self-reflection is not about guilt, it's about ownership. And ownership is the beginning of change. When you can admit that your response wasn't just shaped by someone else's behavior, but also by your own wounds, your own patterns, your own unhealed places, then you can begin to respond differently. Then, the same situation that used to control you becomes an opportunity to learn, to grow, to become something deeper and more grounded than you were before. This is not weakness, it is strength of the rarest kind. Anyone can defend themselves, anyone can find fault in others, but few are willing to say, I may have contributed to this, or I was more reactive than I needed to be, or even just I need to grow, that is where maturity begins. And that is where peace begins, not in controlling others, but in mastering ourselves. Looking inward also exposes the stories we carry, stories we've told ourselves for years. Maybe someone once made you feel like your voice didn't matter, so now you overcompensate by speaking louder, pushing harder, not letting anything go. Maybe you grew up in a home where silence meant safety, so now you avoid conflict at all costs, even when it harms your relationships. These patterns don't excuse hurtful behavior, but they explain it. And when we take the time to understand our stories, we stop being controlled by them. We can interrupt the cycle. We can become people who respond with intention rather than instinct. But that takes courage, because sometimes what you find when you look inward isn't pretty. Sometimes you see pride, sometimes you see fear, sometimes you see a heart that is still bruised, still angry, still carrying offenses from years ago. And everything in you will want to run from that reflection, to point back to the other person's flaws, to say, at least I'm not like them. But healing doesn't come from comparison, it comes from confession. From saying, this is who I am today, but this is not who I have to remain. You don't become better by avoiding the mirror. You become better by facing it, even when what you see makes you uncomfortable. Because the mirror doesn't just reflect your flaws, it reveals your capacity. It shows you where you've been, but also where you can go. It shows you what needs to be surrendered, what needs to be strengthened, and what needs to be let go. Some of the most transformative growth in your life will come from the hardest interactions you'll ever have, not because the other person changed, but because you did. Because you finally stopped waiting for them to apologize, to validate you, to meet you halfway, and you decided to take responsibility for your part. You chose peace over pride. You chose integrity over impression. You chose growth over comfort. It won't always feel good. In fact, it rarely does. But what it creates in you is something solid, something unshakable, and over time, you begin to see those same difficult people in a different light. Not as enemies to avoid, but as teachers. Unwanted ones, maybe, but teachers nonetheless. Teachers that expose your rough edges and force you to decide whether you'll stay the same or let the fire refine you. We want so badly to be right, to be understood, to be treated fairly, and those desires are not wrong. But sometimes, in the pursuit of those things, we miss the deeper work, the work that asks not, how can I change them, but how can I be changed through this? That's the kind of question that shifts the entire tone of your life. It moves you from reaction to reflection, from defensiveness to discernment, from blame to transformation, and that kind of change doesn't just make you easier to live with. It makes you stronger, kinder, wiser, and more rooted in the kind of character that doesn't rise and fall with the behavior of others. Because at the end of the day, the only person you have the power to change is the one looking back at you in the mirror. And if you're willing to do that work, to reflect deeply and honestly, then even the most difficult people can become the very thing that pushes you toward the person you were meant to be. There is a weight to our words, a weight to our silence, a weight to the choices we make when someone wrongs us, disrespects us, interrupts us, frustrates us. We don't always feel it in the moment. Sometimes it feels like we're just reacting, just doing what anyone else would do. But make no mistake, our responses carry gravity. They echo louder than we think, and they say more about us than we often want to admit. When someone cuts you off in conversation, or questions your integrity, or treats you unfairly, those moments have a way of pulling something up from inside you. They don't create what's inside, they reveal it, and what comes out is not random. It's not disconnected from who we are. It's a signal, a signpost pointing to what's truly governing our hearts. You might not be able to control what someone says to you. You can't control if they respect you or misunderstand you or treat you with dignity, but you can control what you do next. That's the moment where character is forged or fractured. That's the moment that matters. Because what you do when you're pressed, what you say when you're provoked, those are the moments that define you more than any calm, collected day ever could. The real test of who we are isn't how we act when we're comfortable, it's how we respond when we're offended. When we're tired, when we've been hurt, it's when the emotions surge, the pressure builds, and we stand at the crossroads between reaction and restraint. And what we choose in that instant, whether we lash out or listen, whether we defend ourselves or demonstrate patience, shapes not only the outcome of that interaction, but the kind of person we're becoming. It's easy to think our responses are small things, a sharp word, a cold stare, a passive-aggressive comment, a decision to ignore someone. These things can feel justified, they feel like protection. But the truth is, every one of those choices leaves a mark, not just on the other person, but on us. Every reaction either strengthens the kind of heart we want to have or weakens it. We're never just reacting to people, we're training ourselves. Every response is a form of practice, rehearsing a kind of character we'll carry into every room, every relationship, every future encounter. Sometimes we act like we're victims of our own reactions. I couldn't help it, we say. They pushed me too far. But those words betray something deeper, because if we truly couldn't help it, then we're saying our lives are governed by the behavior of others. We're saying we've handed over the reins of our peace, our dignity, our self-control to the very people who hurt us. That's not strength, that's bondage. And the tragedy is, we often don't even realize we've chained ourselves to someone else's dysfunction. But what if you could break that chain? What if you could decide, in that heated moment, to respond not based on how they treated you, but based on who you truly want to be? That's where freedom begins. Not in changing others, but in refusing to let their chaos become your identity, in choosing responses that are rooted not in ego or emotion, but in values that are deeper and truer. It doesn't mean being passive. It doesn't mean letting people walk all over you, but it does mean realizing that revenge and reaction might feel good in the moment, but they don't heal. They don't build anything worth keeping. They tear down. They escalate. They widen the divide. Think about a time someone deeply hurt you. Maybe they betrayed you, embarrassed you, challenged you unfairly. Think about what rose up in you, the anger, the heat, the sense of injustice. Now think about how you responded. Did you meet them on their level, or did you hold your ground without losing your peace? Did your words build a bridge or burn one? Did you walk away knowing you honored your convictions, or did you feel the sting of regret for something you couldn't take back? These questions aren't meant to shame you, they're meant to wake you up. Because every single one of us has responded poorly before. Every one of us has let our emotions take the lead, but we don't have to keep doing that. We can choose better. We can slow down, breathe, and ask, what kind of legacy am I leaving in this moment? What story am I writing with my response? When people look back on how you treated them, they won't always remember the exact words you used, but they will remember how you made them feel. Did your response communicate respect, even in disagreement? Did it reflect strength that didn't need to shout? Did it make room for both truth and kindness? That's not easy. In fact, it's one of the hardest things you'll ever do, because it requires you to silence the voice inside that demands to be right. That wants to win, that wants to put the other person in their place. But responding well isn't about winning arguments, it's about winning people. And even when you can't win them, you can still win the battle within yourself. There's a kind of power in restraint that most people never experience. There's a deep, quiet dignity in being able to say, I will not let this situation drag me into something I'll regret. That's not weakness. That's strength under control. That's a person who's not ruled by emotion, but ruled by conviction. You have more power in those moments than you realize. The power to choose peace, to choose wisdom, to choose to represent something greater than yourself. And sometimes that choice will go unnoticed. No one will applaud you for staying calm. No one will thank you for not retaliating, but your soul will know. Your heart will carry the reward of a clean conscience. And over time, those kinds of choices form a life that's marked by integrity, not impulse. So the next time someone tests your patience, tries your character, or disrespects your name, remember this. Your response is not just about that moment. It's not just about them, it's about you. It's about what kind of person you're building, what kind of example you're setting, and what kind of story you're living, because your response is never small. It's shaping something far bigger than the moment you're in, and the weight of it is far heavier than it seems. There comes a point when you have to decide what kind of life you want to live. Not just what kind of job you want, not just what kind of relationships you want, but what kind of soul you want to carry through this world. And if you're going to live with integrity, with clarity, with peace, then you can't keep living at the level of reaction. You can't keep letting difficult people pull you into the same shallow cycles of anger, avoidance, and blame. There's a higher ground, but not everyone climbs it. It's easier to stay where it's safe. It's easier to gossip, to vent, to gather people around you who validate your pain instead of challenge you to rise above it. But ease isn't the goal, growth is. Every time you encounter someone who frustrates you, someone who disrespects you, someone who gets under your skin, you're presented with a choice. Will you stay in the low ground, bonding in kind, matching energy for energy, letting offense shape your behavior? Or will you take the harder path? Upward, the path that chooses patience over pettiness, the path that seeks wisdom instead of revenge, the path that calls something better out of you, even when the other person doesn't seem to deserve it. That's the difference between surviving your conflicts and being transformed by them. The low ground is crowded. That's where most people live. It's filled with people who are constantly on edge, always waiting to be offended, always ready to fight for their dignity in a way that ends up costing them their peace. But the higher ground, it's quieter there. Not because there's no conflict, but because the noise of ego and offense doesn't echo as loudly. People who walk there have scars, yes, but they also have strength. They've learned that you don't gain anything worthwhile by winning arguments that cost you your character. They've seen what bitterness does to the soul and have chosen a better way. But here's the truth. That path doesn't feel good at first. It feels lonely. It feels unnatural. Everything in you will scream to react, to protect yourself, to get the last word. That's why most people don't take it. Because the high road requires discipline, restraint, and a kind of love that goes beyond mere sentiment. It requires you to see people not just as problems to fix or enemies to defeat, but as human beings, flawed and complex, just like you. That kind of vision changes the way you respond to them. It pulls you out of the smallness of the moment and into a larger story, one where your growth matters more than your pride. You are not obligated to stay trapped in patterns that don't serve who you're becoming. You're not bound to repeat the emotional habits of your past. You don't have to keep clapping back, shutting down, or walking away without doing the hard work of understanding. There's another way to live. A deeper, fuller, more courageous way, and yes, it will cost you something. It might cost you your comfort, your need to be right, your desire for immediate vindication. But it will give you something that's worth far more: peace of mind, strength of character, and the ability to walk through conflict without being consumed by it. When you decide to take the higher ground, you're not saying that what happened to you doesn't matter. You're not saying the other person was right. You're saying that your response is not going to be dictated by someone else's dysfunction. You're saying you're not going to let hurt harden you. You're saying that your future is too important, your calling too valuable, your inner life too sacred to be given away so cheaply to anger or retaliation. There's a kind of dignity in refusing to let someone else write your emotional script. There's power in walking away without needing to make a scene. There's wisdom in choosing silence when noise would only feed the fire. That doesn't mean you become a doormat. It means you become deliberate. It means you understand that not every battle is worth fighting, and not every insult deserves a reply. It means you've learned how to hold your ground without losing your soul. You weren't made to live small, reactive, bitter, always explaining yourself, always chasing validation. You were made to walk in grace, to extend mercy, not just when it's easy, but when it costs you something. You were made to be bigger than the offense, stronger than the moment, wiser than the conflict. And that doesn't happen by accident. It happens when you decide, over and over again, to rise above the noise, to slow down, to ask hard questions, to take responsibility for your own heart, even when others don't. That's what the higher ground requires, a kind of maturity that isn't measured by how much you know, but by how much you can endure without becoming bitter, a kind of strength that isn't loud but steady. that doesn't collapse under the weight of being misunderstood, that can stay rooted even when everything in you wants to strike back. That's not weakness, that's real power. Some people will never change. Some will never say sorry. Some will keep being difficult, no matter how kind or patient or clear you are. But their behavior is not the point. Your growth is. Your integrity is. And every time you choose to respond from that place, not from your insecurity, not from your pride, but from your purpose, you grow into someone more grounded, more courageous, more whole. The truth is, the people who irritate you the most are often the ones who show you where you still need to grow. They reveal your triggers, your blind spots, your undealt with wounds. And if you let them, they'll lead you straight into the work you've been avoiding. Not because they're right, not because they deserve your patience, but because they've become the pressure that reveals the cracks, and the pressure that, if handled well, can turn those cracks into places of deeper strength. So what will you do the next time someone frustrates you, the next time someone disrespects you, the next time someone tests your character in a way that feels unfair and infuriating? Will you descend into the cycle of offense, blame, and bitterness? Or will you climb, will you take the harder path, the quieter path, the path that may not get applause but will lead to freedom, because there is a better way, a higher way, but it will only be yours if you're willing to rise. You don't have time to keep brushing this off. You don't have the luxury of treating your reactions, your habits, your patterns with indifference like they don't matter. They matter. Every moment, every word, every interaction, especially the ones with difficult people, is shaping you. You are not standing still. You're either growing or you're hardening. You're either learning to respond with wisdom or you're falling deeper into reflexive pride. You're becoming something. So the question is, what? This isn't a topic to study and forget. This isn't just about people who annoy you or frustrate you or make you uncomfortable. This is about your soul. This is about your life, because the way you respond to difficult people doesn't just affect your relationships. It reveals what rules you. It exposes what you believe about power, about dignity, about yourself, and it becomes your testimony. Whether you know it or not, the way you respond in moments of tension is preaching something. It's declaring what kind of person you are and who you truly trust. You can't keep excusing the way you talk when you're angry. You can't keep blaming the other person for every harsh response you give. You can't keep saying this is just who I am when who you are is impatient, defensive, cold, or prideful. That's not strength. That's immaturity disguised as personality. And if you don't confront it now, it will confront you later through broken trust, failed relationships, and a heart that's grown bitter instead of brave. There is an urgency to this, not because someone's watching you with a scorecard, but because your life is too short and your purpose is too important to be ruled by people who don't even know your story. And yet, that's exactly what happens when you let difficult people dictate your peace. They pull your emotions, shape your attitude, dictate your energy, and suddenly they're leading your life. Not because they should, but because you've handed them the power with every reaction, every argument, every grudge. Some of us have been living reactive for so long we've convinced ourselves that this is normal. That conflict always has to be dramatic. That being disrespected means we have to defend ourselves at all costs, that being wronged gives us permission to get even, but none of that is true. It feels true because it's easy. It feels true because it's familiar, but familiar doesn't mean right. And if you never stop to challenge your normal will destroy the parts of you that were meant to thrive in peace and purpose. There is a battle going on inside you every single time someone pushes your buttons. Every single time someone cuts you off, dismisses you, talks down to you. In those moments, you are not just deciding how to respond to them. You are deciding what kind of person you're willing to become. And it's not just a one-time decision, it's daily, hourly, sometimes minute by minute. That's why this can't be a casual matter, because the cost of getting this wrong is too high. Some of the deepest regrets people carry are not about what was done to them. They are about how they responded. Words they can't take back, cold shoulders that became permanent distances, defensiveness that drove away people who genuinely cared, silence that should have been wisdom but was really pride in disguise. And the thing is, most of those people didn't think they were making a faltering decision in that moment. They thought they were just reacting, but their reaction became a ripple, a wave, a story they had to live with. You're writing that story now, and you will either write it with conviction or by default, but either way, you are writing it. What you tolerate in your reactions today becomes the standard of your character tomorrow. You don't just get better at dealing with people by accident, you get better by intention. You get better by recognizing the urgency of your need to change, not them, not the difficult person, but you. And until that becomes real to you, until the weight of that truth settles in your bones, you'll keep repeating the same cycles, you'll keep having the same arguments, you'll keep feeling like a victim in situations where you actually had a choice. So what are you waiting for? Are you waiting for them to change first? Are you waiting until you've been pushed far enough to finally lose it again and justify it later? Are you waiting until the damage is done and you're left picking up pieces of your piece, wondering how things got so messy? You don't need another excuse, you need resolve, you don't need more time to think about it. You need conviction to act on what you already know is true. You've been down this road, you know where it leads. And it's not where you want to go. It ends in resentment, in regret, in stagnation. But you don't have to keep walking that way. You can turn. You can change your posture, your tone, your approach. You can slow down, listen deeper, speak less, forgive faster, and confront with more grace and less venom. But none of that will happen if you keep treating this like a minor issue. It's not. This is life defining. Because how you deal with difficult people reveals your capacity to lead, to love, and to live with integrity. And no one drifts into that kind of life by accident. It has to be fought for. It has to be chosen. Especially when it's hard, especially when it's unfair, especially when no one else seems to be doing it. And maybe that's what you need to hear, that you might be the only one in your circle willing to rise above the drama. That you might have to be the first to apologize, the first to break the pattern, the first to walk away from the argument not because you lost, but because you've outgrown the need to win. That's hard. It's lonely, but it's also the path to freedom, because there is freedom in not needing people to act a certain way for you to be okay. There's power in knowing that your identity isn't wrapped up in how someone treats you. There's clarity in seeing difficult people as mirrors, not enemies. And there's peace in choosing to respond not out of your wounds, but out of your convictions. So act like it matters, because it does. Respond like it's urgent, because it is. Speak like your words carry weight, because they do. And live like the way you handle difficult people could change the trajectory of your life, because it absolutely can.